We've brought in a really cool background that's part of our website. And there's just a couple of slides of information that really just act as the teaser to the application. Um, One of the cool things that we've done is really worked with touch events to go ahead and let a person slide from left to right to kind of go through the process. I'm going to demonstrate that real quick. We're going to go one, we'll go another, and then on our fourth one, or I guess our third swipe, we're at the very end of this thing. We're going to change out the text to go ahead and let a person get started. And you also have the ability to go ahead and swipe in the other direction to go back in case you missed something. Now, a lot of that seems trivial, that seems kind of obvious, but I want to go into some of the mechanics there. For you guys who are out there who do some programming yourself, oops, we just lost VS Code. Give me a second here, fellas. All right, technical issues, my bad there. Gonna go ahead and restart our server. All right, that's just running again. My bad, everyone. And we're gonna go to onboarding our index file. Give this a second to load up. While this is loading up, one quick thing I want to talk about React Native. One of the real pleasures of working with it is a pretty speedy experience, which is always important for a developer. You have a lot of things that are called like hot refreshes or hot reloads. Basically, when I put in code into the system, we should see it relatively instantly on the screen, which is a great kind of visual confirmation for me as a programmer and the designer as well. You'll see in a lot of times older systems take a couple of seconds, which, you know, one-on-one, it doesn't seem like a big idea or a big problem. But, you know, when you have a couple hour coding sessions, it definitely drags on. So another really great shout out to React Native for that. I'm going to go ahead and go into this specifically. So I have a little file set up here that's just going to act as our slides. The reason why we want to kind of self-contain this is, one, we want a good place where this is kept nice and neat and organized and we can access it. But the other issue, or the other reason why we want it, is we want it behind a single variable because we want to grab this length all the time. Because we have this whole pagination, we have this whole animation and things like that, we want to just be able to say like, hey, are we at the beginning of the thing? Are we at the end of the thing? How many things do we have in between? That's really going to be something that's good for us. And it also allows us to just add in one more item. I'll just take this last one and double it up. And it's going to go ahead and put us in a situation where all we have to do is add that one thing and everything automatically works with that. So if we did want to go from 4 slides down up to 5 slides, we'd have that there. But let's go ahead and get into some of the mechanics here. And again, Challen, go ahead and check out the chat, whether that's on YouTube or in Riverside or whatever. If someone has a specific question, I'd love to answer it. But one of the things that we did that's so special about this is that we kind of work on several layers here. At the bottom layer, I guess you have your image as a background, and we have a little bit of a gradient there to make sure that it's dark enough to read the text properly. And then we lay out some things like, oh, here we have our logo, and here's like our placeholder for the different like text boxes. And then we also have our little pagination widget. That is where we actually stop. We then add in another layer, which is going to grab the entire screen real estate. And we're going to listen on that layer specifically for events like a person panning from left to right. And that's why we have this nice little thing where anywhere we grab, it's going to go ahead and mock and basically follow up with that transition or that animation. You know, if we worked in a situation where we were focused solely on like a bounding box within this text and really moving there, we'd have an awkward situation where a user would probably try and drag up here and then get no response. And that's just not a very good experience. So we work with these multiple levels, specifically trying to grab as much of the screen real estate as possible to go ahead and work for that animation. And I'm actually going to show you here in the code where that is. So we use this thing called a pan gesture handler at a very top level. Underneath that, we go ahead and put out like a perfectly or a it's called an absolute position box to go ahead and grab this entire state here. And then we use those two together to basically watch those pan gestures. The last thing that we do inside there is we lay down our button. We actually need that to go on top of that layer that listens for those tap events or those pan events, just so that a user can tap here and still get the experience that they expect. Let me go ahead and do that. Looks like I broke something there, so that's my bad, but you guys get the idea. If for some reason we put that button underneath all of that, then it would be blocked by that gesture, and we don't want to do that. So we have to work on multiple layers here to get the experience that we want. I'd love to go a little bit more into the code, but that would probably take up a whole session. The things I'll probably highlight here specifically are working with this gesture event. So there's a couple cool things to watch out here. And whenever you work with these events specifically, there's three kind of events that we want to listen to. There's a few other ones, but three that always kind of happen. We have an on start event, which basically says that when the user starts the event, go ahead and do something special. In our case, we don't really care about when they start. That's just some sort of detail, but a lot of cases do care about that. The next thing is the on active. This is while a user is actually in the process of that pan gesture. This is like the left to right. When they're in the midst of that, we're basically updating things, and that's going to basically, I shouldn't say the word basically, that's going to go ahead and start the transition here on the text to go from one to the next. And then lastly, we have an on end. The on end is kind of crucial because we have a certain threshold. So if we only move over slightly, we're going to just bounce back, and that's good. That's what we want. Again, we can go in the opposite direction. I think I broke things when I hit the button. Let me go ahead and reload here. And bounce in the other direction. Great. So if we don't hit that threshold, we just want to bounce back. And if we do hit that threshold, we want to go ahead and complete the animation and then go ahead and bring up the next set of content. And we can kind of see that done here. So here's where we check out that threshold. You know, if we don't meet the threshold, we're just going to bounce back. Here's where we just check and make sure we're not on the end or the beginning, so we don't go in the opposite direction. And then lastly, if we pass that check, we're going to go ahead and finish up the animation and then bring in the next content piece. And it kind of happens on a few different steps. So in parallel, we're going to move over and we're going to bring down the opacity as we do that. Then we're going to actually move the content back instantly, set up the next content, and then fade in. So at the end result, it looks really, really good to the user, but that's just how we do it on the execution level. Anyway, I've talked quite a bit. Ben, what do you think? How do you like that experience?
I think it's a breathtaking, beautiful UI, and I really just out of this world.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. No, I think it's solid. I think I'm liking the direction that we're going in, and I think it's a great. It's important to make a good first impression with people as we're trying to get people to put something in their car, right? And or connect their car to us and tell us a whole bunch about kind of the biggest toy in their life,
Yep.
It's really important to make a good first impression. So I think, is there a little extra work that's been put into this? Maybe. Maybe.
No, us? Are you kidding? No, we've never done.
But I think it's worthwhile to not throw somebody into some, half-assed thing when they first download this. And also, I mean, like, we're talking, I don't know who's watching or how many people or whatever, but like, we spend a lot of time in our own kind of community and around a lot of people all day, every day who know what DIMO is and know all about it and are kind of really excited and enthusiastic about it. We also have to keep in mind that a lot of people who are going to receive this app, via a referral link or just word of mouth or whatever it is, are not going to have, hours and hours and hours put into the understanding DIMO and the ecosystem and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
we really do need to sort of nail it on our first attempt. So I think it's worth
I think
it.
I think that's such a good point. We've gone from a world where, websites ruled everything to a point where a lot of projects with their mobile application, like that's to them the beginning of the user journey. And if that's the case, just like in the web world where people spend a lot of time on heroes or before the fold or things like that to make sure that users really understood what was going on, we could look at this same mechanism to say this is the starting point for a lot of users. This is something where you basically have 15 seconds to state your case, and a user is going to say this is for me or this is not for me.
Our boy Bean Jackson is asking how you determine
Oh
the
yeah.
best value for the threshold.
What do you ask specifically?
It's in the chat. How did you determine the best value for the threshold? I think for your.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, so a lot of this is based off of the screen width, and we've got some great APIs given to us by React Native to kind of get that easily. And then we know that screen width is almost cut in half because we have the left side and the right side, and we're starting from the middle, and you go either direction. I went ahead and just did something arbitrary. So if, I think on the new iPhone X's or like the iPhone 13s or whatever, we've got basically like 370-ish pixels across. And if you split that in half, that's what, 180 some odd. And then if you split that into half, that's kind of where we landed. I think we have a threshold of about 80. So it's about a fourth of the screen on those modern screens is where we're at for the threshold. In actuality, it is going to feel a little bit more aggressive. Like here I am, but that's like that's like you brushing something off of your phone. Like that's not a real thing. There's where we kind of hit it. That's where we kind of get into the trigger. So at the end of the day, you want to start off with like a good reasoning, but then really it's about feel after that. So we kind of start off with a fourth of the screen and then play with the number a little bit. At one point, I used the eighth of the screen. That just felt too sensitive. And at one point, I had half the screen, and that felt too rigid. So right there around the 80 pixel mark is where we kind of feel good. And we might play with that a little bit more. We've got a couple of different phones that we'll play with, both iOS and Android. And if it feels like we can kind of get somewhere better, we'll do that then. But great question. Yeah.
Good stuff. Are you, where are you at with building out the actual like onboarding steps? Is that something where are you at on that? I can walk through.
No, I think right now I'd love for you to give a tour.
Yeah.
I'm still like in the early stages of that coding,
Yeah.
in between where we are now and where that really is. I've got to do a whole bunch of stuff logic wise with the user to say like, hey, has the user complete this onboarding? Because if they have, we never want to show it to them again.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want to be able to accurately guess like, hey, has this user logged in? Because if they've logged in, we want to get them to a spot where they can just re-log in on the next session.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in that world right now. That's kind of fun, but also kind of lame. Not really the best experience for this time. But why don't we go through your Figma stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. We'll show you guys a little bit how the sausage is made here on my end. My computer's kind of chugging along a bit, so bear with me if we start to lose it here.
Awesome. And just while you're getting set up, Bean asked to follow up about like the speed. We can definitely get that measurement. Right now, we're going into it a little bit bluntly. It's something that we can play with for sure. The fun thing about programming, especially for a long-term project, is that you can always say like, okay, this is ground zero or the foundation, and from there, like we can tweak. And we can also reverse those tweaks, which happens probably more than we'd like it to happen.
Cool.
But great follow-up.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk through sort of the process of how we got to what you just saw and what we're going to do next. We'll show you guys a little bit about how we set up a file and how we actually work from like initial exploration through handoff. And then maybe let's just chat through doing like a really quick wireframe of some of the latest stuff that we're working on. Sound good? Sound good.
Yeah, I love it.
So if you are using our app, you'll know that our onboarding and login is there's some fat that could be trimmed there. There's a lot of reasons why we ended up with it the way that it is, but we know, hey, we got to get it together a little bit. So what we did when we kicked off this sort of onboarding revamp is I went through I went through again purely everything that we do in our onboarding as a new user. So what I did is I would take it and I broke it out into steps and did basically a full sort of end-to-end audit of the account creation and vehicle connection process. This is something that you have to do when you're looking at, modifying a feature or iterating on a feature. It's always good to step back and look at what you are working with and what works well and what doesn't work well and where you can trim fat, and trim extra steps out of the process. So what we did is we went through the whole thing. I wrote up my strengths, advantages, drawbacks, weaknesses, and recommendations.
Give us some high levels. What was like one thing that you saw during this process where you're like, man, we really sucked here?
There's too much damn text everywhere. My 2 cents. There's too much text and there's too much unnecessary sort of breaks.
Yep.
You get into this weird sort of like knot rhythm as you're going through our current onboarding, just because the way that we set it up, I think the style that we chose or the pattern that we chose would be better suited for something different than what we're doing. There's a lot of this, you see it on like a Typeform or like a TurboTax or wherever, just like very breaking out a complex thing into just step by step, where really you're just filling out a form. We took a bit of that approach, but I think when we actually got it out there and got it in people's hands, it became a little too cumbersome. And we even do have things like, we were going to do something cool with this slide to get started interaction that, we had like kicked around what we were going to do with it, but then we ended up going, maybe it's not a good idea. And then it gets left in, and then we start building other features, and then we never end up coming back to it and either doing something cool or taking it out. So there are some high levels there, but I mean, there's just a lot of explainer text throughout this thing. And what you also see is a lot of extra steps, an extra screen. Finish setting up my account. Okay, I just started setting up my account. Now I have to take another action before I get into my country, right? We do have some little issues, like we'll get a font will show up wrong, which I call attention to, or I will have made some error, on my end with something that I handed off. So we went through a lot of this. Like, again, we're also trying to strip out a lot of like the tech speak or the jargon and make it a little more just palatable for a casual person. So the difference between use a PIN to access your account and use a PIN to restore a previous login session, one is like, oh cool, I'll log in with this PIN. The other one is like, is a login session different than what I'm doing now? Is that a thing I'm going to learn about later? Is that this thing? There's a lot of stuff like that you have to consider, which sounds like obvious, but when you actually start digging into it from not just being in your own little world, it does all sort of add up and make a difference.
Yeah, I think one thing that I learned that I always had a really bad habit of, and I probably still have a little bit there, but I would write out explainer text in the application that was very much from my world, like, oh, you need this for the session, and or yada yada yada, and it's just like nobody knows what you're talking about. Like, I don't even know if you know what you're talking about. Like,
But there's also things like, you know, we need a we need like a privacy sort of, we need, there are various legal things that we need privacy policies, we need stuff like that. Like the way that those things are conveyed to somebody, uh, you can do it on one screen where somebody has to see it and acknowledge it. You can do it on, its own, special screen like we've got.
Yep.
But any opportunity where we could consolidate is something that I wanted to take a look at. So again, we went through, I went through the whole thing again and looked at it with sort of as critical of an eye as we could. And there's just a ton of text and a ton of ifs, and we wanted to make it a little more friendly. So what we do from there is, I have another file, which I won't get into, but I have another file where I took everything, put it in a FigJam file to do some wireframing, took every opportunity where I could to consolidate something and consolidated those things, and built out a much more sort of concise and refined onboarding process. So where we are currently is we've gotten through account creation, but we are still working on adding a vehicle, or actually connecting a vehicle, and I'll talk through what we're working with there, and we'll get into some stuff there. So
Awesome.
How we do these things in these files is there's an exploration page, which is where we're currently living. We'll go through sort of all possible ways to consolidate. This is low fidelity, like how can I trim some fat here? So we'll get it out like that. And we'll just start iterating and experimenting. We try to keep things low fidelity at first so that we can really get a better sense of just what's the user experience like, not what's the window dressing like. So we try different variations of like, do we keep that little progress stepper below? Do we put it above? What are the pros and cons? If we leave it on one, if we leave it up high, then, does this behave strangely? Make more sense to put it down by the buttons? Does it make sense to, is it visually, do I even know what it is? So we go through that, and then we start to play with a little bit more, experimenting. Now that we've got the flow down a little bit better, we start to play a little more with some more visual things. So we start to say, what happens if we do sort of an animated, a little video in the background or a photo in the background? What's that experience look like? Let's use some of our brand assets and pull that in. What does more sort of polished up, like a location services look like? Do we use a real map? Do we use an image of a map? Do we, let people zoom in on all of this stuff? What's the interaction like? And then we start to put that into a little more high fidelity. Here are the, or higher fidelity. Here's those basic workflows. And then again, there's just a lot of, pros and cons. Why would we do this instead of that? Why doesn't this work? Why does this work? And we want to arrive at something that isn't just visually nice, but is also, at its core, it should be solving a problem. And it should be not just, oh, this looks really cool, but I can't use it. It needs to look good, and it needs to look aesthetically pleasing, but it also, above all else, needs to be functional. So every app could be a black screen with white text on it that is purely functional, but it doesn't look as good. So
I want to go a little bit more into your process, because I think it's so interesting. It's almost like you're here in this big Figma file, and you're constantly, it's almost like you're playing chess against yourself. It's like every design you do, you think is like the best design, but then you're kind of forced to be like, well, could I do better?
yeah.
I know that, like, in the past, you and I have talked about like other UI designers like Eric Kennedy, and we've talked about his process. He calls it like learning how to ride a bike. When you start going, you lean a little bit to the left and then you fall over. So the next time you lean a little bit more in the opposite direction, and before you know it, like, then you're riding a bike, but you have to do this whole like lean. I feel like when I've seen you work in the past and we've gone in it, it's almost like this expansion where we just take anything under the sun that could possibly be there, and then we sort of filter out or reduce but that's just like the next level. Once we get to that next level, we elevate what made it to the next level. We go in and we expand again, and you
Yeah.
can almost see it visually in your levels that you've got there.
All right, because you get in here and then it goes like it
How
starts.
many designs do you think you did for this specific like screen?
This one, not as many as some of the others, but to your point, I mean, the this was something that I had to sort of get out of the habit of diving down the rabbit hole of like I
Yep.
would put together that first thing and I would say like, oh, it's the first thing that came to mind, which means it's the most intuitive thing that came to mind, you know, so let's go into this, or let's start on this and let's go way too high fidelity into
Hmm.
one concept versus going low fidelity, you know, casting a really wide net. And that's something that earlier on, you know, in my career, I had to get out of that habit of doing
Yep.
that because you really don't sort of canvas everything. You don't really understand what the full scope of solving a problem could be. You're just like, oh, dude, wouldn't it be sick if like the map went like this? And then you start to tailor your whole thing, and it's that like it is the absolute wrong way to get into a project. So there's a reason why we see all this, you know, exploration, and this is a relatively lightweight file compared to some of the other stuff that we went through.
Hmm.
But once we do some of this work, we start to, you know, I start to explore a little bit more visual, you know, components. Like we started dressing it up a little bit, but, you know, we have some new, you know, we have some assets that we're putting together. We have some assets that are coming into us, and we have some new patterns and styles that we're experimenting with. So you can see in here, you know, we've got gradients that we're gonna use, not in this, you know, much. If anybody's watching, we're not doing it like this. But you have to try is the thing. You don't really know until you start to play with it. So here's Ben
Yep.
putting together different gradients, being like, what if we threw this info on a gradient? Like, does that convey our brand? Is it distracting? Is it cool? Is it a mess? What if we tried doing something like our vehicle card? You know, is that confusing? Is that cohesive? Is it ugly? Is it cool? You don't really know until you try. So we kept going, and basically we get to this, which is, I'll zoom in a little bit in a minute, but basically what we do here is I've arrived at a set of designs that I like, that I've gone through with sort of, at least on a UX level, not necessarily on a styling level, but at least on a
Hmm.
UX level, I've validated with Aaron, I've validated with some other members of our team to make sure, you know, do we find this intuitive and does this solve the problem we're trying to solve?
Yep.
This big hero image is still a work in progress, but this is one of our new assets that we're planning to play around with, and we thought this is a great opportunity to maybe let this, you know, shine. It's a brand element as we're getting into onboarding.
You know what's so funny about this photo specifically is I was living in Paris for a long time, and the airport, Charles de Gaulle, which is like the biggest airport in Europe, actually has this exact like turn in like the international terminal. So, like the moment I saw this, and there's like these little terminals along the side, just like this, and there's this big turn that everyone who's gone through that terminal and been dropped off at knows of, and it's exactly like this thing.
Well, okay, now I'm gonna.
So I look at this and I'm like, huh.
No,
The
no.
first couple times I saw it, I was like, this is familiar, and I don't know what it is. And then finally, we were talking about it. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah. Well,
So,
okay. Well, not it, but or I have to ask our illustrator to change it. But
no, it's good. We'll keep it. I love
anyway,
it.
what we do when we arrive at sort of, you know, this is what you guys were looking at, um, you know, on Aaron's screen. What we do when we arrive at something that we feel really good about and we feel like we've accounted, you know, we've done sort of visually what we want to do, we've got our UX down, and on something like, you know, this part of onboarding, there really aren't a huge amount of edge cases, and we've already had this out in the wild, so we've experienced, you know, a few thousand people going through it, and we now know, you know, we basically know the ways that it can fail.
Hmm.
Or all the errors that we can have. Once we've kind of gone through that and we've said, have we accounted for all of these different states that we can think of? Have we accounted for every edge case that we can think of? We move it into our handoff screen. our handoff page. And this is what Aaron works off of, and he started chopping up the beautiful image for reasons known only to him. And what I'll do is I will go in here and I will write any additional call outs. So like this intro slide needs to only be shown to people when they first launch the app. And then we'll go through dev notes of just little things. So one of the things that we thought maybe we would try is like, do we take that big image and sort of pan across it as people swipe through these things? Do we just have them swipe through the things, keep the background static, And, Aaron and I have worked together a long time, so I kind of trust his judgment, and we trust each other's judgment.
A little leash. I got a little leash.
There's like if I put in, this is supposed to go like this, exactly like this, and you're like,
Yep.
dude, juice not worth the squeeze. Like, yeah,
Yep.
we'll move on here. But basically, what we end up with is sort of our refined, much abridged onboarding where we can get in and you'll notice we're allowing people to do location services now. There's some cool features we're building around that. If you want, if you don't, go for it. But basically, we go from creating an account being, come on, I told you I'm chugging along. We go from creating an account being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 screens before you actually get to a car, to 1, 2, 3 at the most, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we trimmed out a whole bunch, and these two are only appearing if somebody creates an account with a wallet. So if you create an account with Google, you'll see screen number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 of them are just confirmation screens. So we took the feature, we shrunk it down, got all the edge cases, we're good to go. Here are all of our edge cases. That's pretty much how we go through stuff like this. Onboarding is pretty straightforward, but when you get to a bigger feature, like we want to build a tab that can accommodate 80 different types of data from every car that exists. Yep. These files look a lot messier and a lot bigger and and there's a lot more exciting stuff going on. So yeah,
I have one more question for you regarding this process, because I think this is so cool, and this is really where it gets, where someone who's first starting off as a UI UX designer to like someone like you who has years under your belt and really can, I don't know, I guess leverage past experience to really see like, okay, this is how we get there or why we do this. But then after that, I think I have a fun little challenge for us. Some work that we're going to do on the fly. You and I, we talked, and we have a section of our NFT composer, which I think we got a little lazy on and needs a little bit of work. We talked about adding another screen to help the user experience. Maybe we can do that real quickly.
Oh, yeah.
But let's go really quickly back to your handoff. I want to talk about something specifically.
What do you got?
So you and I always talk about trust. And it's something that's a little bit hard to nail down what that actually means. And specifically when we look at this screen, we have in the very middle this ability to enable location services. Apple and Android have both actually spent a lot of time letting users know that there is something going on here with applications and location services. And what do you do as a designer when you're basically asking the user for something that so many people out there are kind of warning users about? Like, how do we basically get over that hump to where a user says, yeah, it's worth it for me to enable this one permission, where iOS and Android are making kind of a big deal out of it?
So, I mean, for me, there's a few things to do there. Thing number one is make an experience that can exist if they don't want to do that. Because ultimately, if we don't have their trust, we're trying to gain their trust, but ultimately we can't, for something like that, which isn't like core to the product. I need somebody to be able to know that they can opt out at any time if they want to,
Yep.
or they can opt out right there. Um, but it does go back to, we said we have to build trust with the user. We have to do it in a way that makes people uh, want to sort of give us, access to something that's maybe personal, information, but also just here's a little short blurb of here's why we're using your location, and here's how you can turn it off at any time.
Yep.
You know, we have to try to, a lot of companies have people who just write like app copy.
Yep.
That's just me here. And
You're Shakespeare for the group.
yeah. So I need to Shakespeare something that makes people trust me. I need to put together a design that feels like they're using a premium product, so that they, don't go like, what is this busted, janky thing that wants to track me and they want to put something in my car? Like, no, I'm deleting this, right? But if you get in and you guide somebody through an experience, but also if you do have like, here's an incentive or here's an explanation for like, this is what we actually need you to do this for. I'll be curious to see what, in the past it's worked. I'll be curious to see how our user base responds to something
Yeah.
like this.
And there's something that we'll be able to look down the line. We can always readjust once we have more information. We're going to capture some analytics about like who wants to use the location-based services versus how people say like, you know what, I'm not comfortable with that yet, but I still want to proceed.
Mm-hmm.
We'll even have, analytics on if a user drops back
Yep.
and says, you know what, I'm going to actually exit the app at this point because this isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super important, and we've had discussions about this in the past. It's, we can only guess so much. You do have bigger projects like Google and whatnot who will put everything in front of a user group before they take an inch. We are a little
We're definitely not doing that. Like,
yeah, we're a little too impatient for that.
but no,
I
but
think
it's not, and I'm not saying that as like a bad thing,
Sure.
And I'm not, that's, I don't want it to come across that way. There are companies that they can throw, tens of millions of dollars at a problem, or they can afford to kind of move glacially slow because that's just the way that they run things. And they can talk through the minutia of every single pixel and every single button and every single interaction, right? And that stuff's fun to do when you really dig into it, but that's just not the environment. That's not what we're doing as a company right now. We're not paralyzed by sort of indecision or, micro analyses. We are, we have a great community that we're able to leverage, and we're able to understand what they want and how they're using our product. We have a lot of people who are very generous with their time, and, will chat through things with me or with you, or they'll test for us, and, low battery. I need to grab a charger real quick. But we have a lot of people who are, helping us out and helping us sort of make up where we can't throw a whole bunch of, millions of dollars and a whole bunch of thousands of hours at making an onboarding process. Like, we had to trust our gut a bit.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we hit, sometimes we miss. You know what? And you miss, you just say whoops, and you go back to it, right?
Absolutely. No, I get it. I love it. And I think it's really the only way to move forward. As a startup and as a disruptor, you kind of have to shoot from the hip a little bit and then say, oh, time to backtrack.
Yep.
But it's good. It's good. I think at the end of the day, we're flexible and sort of self-aware enough to say that, you know what, let's go a different direction.
Yeah.
I talk to programmers all the time. Obviously, we have people here on the team as well as others outside the team. And I have no problem throwing away code. A lot of programmers that I've worked with will kind of write something, and there's just like this reluctance to ever move away from that. And designers, I'm sure, are the same way, Ben.
Dude, yeah. But look, we have shot and missed, okay? And, there are some things that we thought, let's try that out, and it didn't really work. And then let me see if I've got one over here. And then we've shot, and I think we've kind of hit. There are, we've gotten great results and great feedback on some of these decisions that we've made on, on this tab. You do try a bunch of ridiculous stuff.
You love You
I'm just
love
playing with it.
that.
I'm just playing around with it, right? But we've shot and missed, and we've shot and hit, right? And
Yep, absolutely.
sometimes you just go, okay, what worked well on that one? What didn't work on the other one? So,
No, I totally agree.
yeah.
Totally agree. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I think we challenged ourselves a little bit here. So we got a little bit lazy with the composer. For the users who haven't done this yet, or for people who are still on the fence about joining DIMO, go ahead and do that now. One of the cool things that just came online with the last release, it's still in beta as far as the big picture, but we've opened up the ability to go ahead and create what I think outsiders refer to as NFTs, but really we're calling the vehicle identity or the vehicle ID on the blockchain. There is some really cool, some really big ideas for this in the future, but right now, if you've got a connected vehicle on our app, you can go ahead and mint an NFT or a vehicle ID of your vehicle. And it's pretty cool. You and I spent a lot of time putting together a little sweet Super Nintendo-esque like composer for your vehicle, so people can really get in there and they can customize. I want a van, or I want like a sports car, or I want a truck with a stripe down the middle of it. A lot of cool things that are going on there. The one problem that we have been is that at the very end of the process, we have like one button that does like 8 different things, and it's kind of confusing for a user.
I know what
So
you're talking about.
I think this is one of those situations where the logic that has to happen is so kind of complex, whereas like really as you and the UX want to make it as seamless for the user. So for those of you who don't know, in the Web3 world or in the blockchain world, you as a user have a private wallet, and we work a lot with Ethereum or Ethereum-like projects, and you need an Ethereum-based wallet to go ahead and work with this. When you create the NFT, which is your vehicle identification or your vehicle ID, it's going to act in the same way as an NFT does, and it's going to exist in your own wallet. But to get it there, we need everything from you to register a wallet, to make sure that your wallet's actively connected to the app, to make sure that you're on the right chain. In this case, it's Polygon, which is a chain that works with Ethereum. And then lastly, we need to go ahead and collect your signature to make sure that when we mint this on your behalf, that we basically have like your authorization to do that. And like I said, Ben, we're doing that all from one button, and we could probably do a better job of that. What do you think?
If you insist, if you'll notice, here's how we set up our files, and gray equals done. So now I'm opening up a gray file.
Uh-oh.
Thanks. But here's another example of how we put a whole bunch of stuff together. So let's go up, all the way up to our latest, which is right when we got to pretty much right before handoff. So what would you like me to do here?
All right. You see that guy that's down below everyone else with the big button?
Yep.
All right.
Okay,
Right there, we have
no longer
mint this
using
vehicle
NFT,
NFT.
so let's we'll call it a vehicle ID.
There you go. And guys, for you out there wondering why we're renaming this, it does have the same mechanism as an NFT, but the Web3 world has just gravitated to NFT meaning one thing, and we're actually trying to do a lot more with this than you would see from a typical, say, CryptoPunks NFT or something like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what do you got? What do you want me to do?
All right, so I was thinking that in between this and our animation, which shows the minting process happening, we kind of go through like a checklist for the user.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of things. We need one, to make sure that you've registered a wallet to your account. That's kind of important. Number two is we need to make sure that you have an active session with your wallet, which is utilized with Wallet Connect. Number three is that we need to make sure that your active session is on the right chain. So we'll check it out, make sure that you're on Polygon, and if you're not on Polygon, we'll ask you to switch.
Mm-hmm.
After that, we're going to go ahead and just ask for your signature. So those 4 things, I believe.
Okay. Run through them again. Or just hop in this file and drop it in here. Up to you.
All right, let me go ahead and I'm on the onboarding file.
I'll hop into vehicle NFT, which we should rename. But whatever, we know what it is. Vehicle ID.
All right, I'm following you here.
Okay, sorry, I'm renaming the file. All right, so here we are. Dev notes. Drop them in here.
Mm-hmm.
Drop in my steps for me, and I will do a little checklist. It's going to be lo-fi at first, obviously, but
Oh, you're gonna kill me. You're gonna have to write it out because the fonts on my system are missing. It doesn't like me typing.
Okay, what do you got?
So, one, you need to register the vehicle or the address to your profile.
Okay.
Two is that we need to make sure there's an active session with your wallet. And then I put in parentheses wallet connect. Number three is that this is kind of a check, but we need to make sure that the active session matches the address in your profile, which, yeah, let's go ahead and say that's something that was really important.
Sure.
Number four is that we need to check to make sure you're on the right chain in that active session. So most people by default are going to be on Ethereum mainnet, and we need to move them over to Polygon mainnet.
Mm-hmm.
And number five is we need to request your signature.
Okay.
There you go.
So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to strip out everything in here. I'm going to get rid of the header. Let's do it low fidelity first. Thankfully, well, how much? Okay, so 5 lines of text, 5 checklist items.
I really like what you did for that onboarding thing we were looking at.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking if I can hit mint and have it, I could possibly convert, I could wipe out the controls here. Like, I could wipe out the controls and all of this, because I want to keep the image. I also want to get better background. I want to keep the image there, I think. But what would happen is I'd lose these. I'd keep my image here, and then what do we call it? Progress list. Here we go.
Checking out your pod system.
Yes, sir. So we made, if you haven't downloaded, or if you're not using our design system, you're doing it wrong. But what I can do is I've got a little component here, and we can auto layout, and here's 5 of them.
I love this because it's like every step is with love.
Right. I'm actually going to make these... No, if I make them full size, then we're going to run out of real estate, and this thing cannot scroll.
Okay, no scroll here. Fair enough. What about for smaller screens? What do we want to do there?
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to make them all compact. They don't need explain text on them. And now compact is going to, it's 220. The whole list is 220 height. So
yep.
Even if
I think we'll be good.
Yeah, even if we just started out like, God, sorry, my computer really is chugging along here.
Are you on the MacBook Air?
No, I'm on the. I gotta just wipe out my drive or whatever. But I'm on a 16-inch Pro from like 2020. Like it's not even old.
Oh man.
I don't know. Yeah, Yev just tells me. I'm like, what's going on? He just goes, laptop too old. I'm like, what? I just got it. It's not even that old. I'm fine. Okay, so let's just throw. We'll worry about copy later. Let's just throw our text in here. So register address to profile. Our next step is, we'll call it verifying session. We'll call this matching sessions. Matching. This one will be matching chains I'll workshop it later. And then actually we
Mm-hmm.
don't need item 5 because item 5 is the actual signature request. So there's actually only 4 checklists items in here. Correct?
What about the situation where like, because basically everything from the second on, we're gonna keep going back and forth and wall connect, including that last one, which is the request signature.
Yeah.
Um, so how would you say that this is kind of part of the checklist, but kind of separate from the checklist?
What I'm unclear what we're bouncing out of.
Yeah. So
Where am
basically,
I
what
leaving? Where am I leaving our app?
basically with every step, we're gonna take you over to Wall Connect. Wall Connect is gonna connect you to your actual wallet application. For a lot of folks, it's gonna be MetaMask. For a couple, it's gonna be Rainbow, where we work with Trust, and there's a few others that we're looking at. Um, but as soon as like we send the signal to go ahead and do something, Wallet Connect is going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to transfer you over to this other application. And inside that other application, you just see a pop up that's like, hey, we need your signature now, or hey, we need to change you from Ethereum to Polygon, or something like that.
Yeah.
So even with this last one, when we hit request signature, it's still going to take you over to say MetaMask, and you're going to have to hit the confirm button for me before we come back to our app, and then we can start the minting.
Yeah. I mean, like, realistically, there's nothing I can do about that, right? Like, I gotta just.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to think about like this fifth one, which kind of seems like a checklist item. Kind of, I want to make sure that like um, people know that as soon as we get the signature, then we can go into it. But we're blocked if you don't give us that signature.
Right. Okay, I'll put it in there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'll stick it.
Leave it in there for now, and we can maybe tweak it later on, a separate button, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just playing around here with like. So let's take our list, our progress. We are progressing nicely. It's all
Mm-hmm.
green. It's all positive. I haven't
Love
really
it.
played with these components all that much yet, or at least the list item or the progress list we just did. So bear with me as I struggle through it. I've got a blank circle in here somewhere. There it is. Okay. So we'll do it like that, you know? So as you do something, we'll check it off, we'll go down it. Let's add a list heading, top of our little list. And what do we want this to say?
It's a good question. I mean, you are the Shakespeare, but I'd say like, well, let's talk about what it is, and then I'll let you come up with the label. We're basically setting up your wallet to have a successful mint. And really, if you were going to do, say, minting an NFT anywhere else, you would kind of go through the same thing, especially if it had you move from Ethereum mainnet to Polygon. I would say this is almost everything. So something with your wallet, blockchain, in that. Complete these steps, these wallet steps. Lorem Ipsum, that works too.
Yeah,
People will get it.
Yeah, we'll do it. So again, there's a, extremely quick and sort of dirty version of like, there's a checklist. There's how, we can do something using our components to quickly go, okay, what's like the foundation of this experience? So I like that we are keeping it here, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we could do.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to do it in a list like this necessarily. We could do, I don't know. Let me think on it more. Like, this is the light, like doing something in this vein is the lightest weight version of it. There is a more involved, like a more sort of graphic way we could go through, item by item. But
you could do like a carousel, but something that's more like automated as opposed to like user swipes it.
That's what I was thinking, where it's like you do something, it shifts over to the next step. You do something, shifts over.
Mm-hmm.
It does something, it shifts over. We could try something like that. But again, it's like how much headache do you want for something like this?
Ben, I was gonna say I thought we got some questions, but really it was Shallon just making fun of your bad computer.
That was like the stupidest thing I did is I bought this thing and then like days later they were like introducing the new M1 chip and I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, like it was like days later that they rolled that out and I was like, oh, some like
Somebody hates me up there.
somebody at Apple who definitely knew it was coming a couple days before was like, I'm gonna let this chump buy this computer
Yep.
for however much money, and not tell them that we're releasing a better one days after. So thanks, guy in the Apple store in Michigan,
Oh gosh.
letting me do this.
Aye.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, Ben, I think we're at time. I think I'll just, love what we're doing here, obviously. And you guys who are out there who are watching this might be your first time kind of tuning in. And it might even be a situation where you don't know what DIMO is or you're just on the fence. Again, check out our website at dimo.zone. Go ahead and grab the mobile app if you haven't already. If you need help connecting your car or you just want to chat with us, we do have a pretty lively Discord. It's there on the homepage. You can see it at the bottom. It's awesome. We're there to answer questions or just talk cars or talk blockchain and how we see the future unfolding. You guys are more than welcome to stop by. You can ask Ben and myself specifically questions if you have, even something that's related to development in general or want to kind of workshop with us what the future demo could be. Ben, I think you want to go ahead and pitch out the pod system that was recently
Use
released.
my design system, mine
Yeah.
/ Daniel / Dora. It's not just me, obviously. It's largely
Mhm.
not just me. Credit to those many lovely people. We're almost 300 people have duplicated our file and are using it, including some people who either stole it or are just harvesting new releases on
Yep.
Figma. Don't go on the UI free whatever version, our version. Get us to 300. Be kind of cool, right?
Yep.
It's cool to see.
I think it's one of the really cool aspects about, the Web3 movement or whatnot. Even though we're specifically intending to build for DIMO, we're doing it in a way that's public, almost like a public good. So this design system, which is used as the backbone for a lot of the stuff that we're building, is built with a larger vision in mind. Even if you're building something that's not even DIMO related, and you just want to go ahead and see a really cool resource out there for your designs or for Figma or whatever, you can go ahead and check that out. Ben, this is such awesome work. It's unbelievable.
If you are deep in demo land and want to start grabbing stuff like all of the cool assets we use for the customizer, like all the car images, stuff like
Yep.
We've got the cool sort of wave on that vehicle card and some more things.
Mhm.
I'm going to be putting out an expansion pack basically with like demo specific stuff. So I want to
Awesome.
not crowd up this. If just random people are like, oh, this looks cool, sure, they know what it is. There's some of our stuff is in there, but if you want to get deep into the I want to build my own customizer, I have all those components for people out in a little expansion pack. Download them both, turn them both on in your asset panel, and then you're me. Then,
Awesome. I love it. That's so great. Gonna keep updating everybody on there. Otherwise, people have a great weekend and we'll be around. See you this time next week.
all right, later, people.
See you guys.